morning class. So today we're going to be talking about identifying and interpreting rhythm patterns so that we can be better musicians in the choir music that we're singing. So today we're going to be looking at whole, half, quarter, and eighth notes, and we're going to be looking at bonus dotted half notes so that we can learn how to identify them in a 4/4 time signature, and so that we can interpret them by clapping and performing the rhythms so that we can better understand the music that we're going to be singing. And we'll know that we've accomplished this because at the end of class today, you guys are going to be able to create and perform your own rhythm patterns. So if everyone will look up at your piece of sheet music, this is one of our Christmas pieces for this semester. So can anybody identify a music symbol that they recognize in this piece of music? And at this time, students will identify, hopefully, notes that they recognize the rhythm pattern for, possibly time signature, possibly clef, possibly bar lines, so that we can kind of engage students into musical symbols that they should hopefully recognize, so I can kind of see where students are at, and so that it will get their minds thinking about musical symbols. So guys, who can tell me what is a measure? Does anyone know? So at this point, hopefully a student would raise their hand and say what a measure was, but if they don't, then, or if they get it kind of wrong or whatever, I can reaffirm then that a measure is a way that we organize music, and so that we can be more organized so that we can group notes and see where we're at as a group. And so it's how we better understand where we are in a piece of music, and it allows us to better identify where notes are. And it's divided by bar lines. And how do we decide how many notes we put in a measure? And so hopefully the class will know. If not, then they'll learn. Time signatures. So what is a time signature? That sounds kind of crazy. A time signature is a symbol at the beginning of music that shows the performer how the rhythm should be counted. Now, what might that look like? Now, hopefully some students have mentioned from the music that they saw at the beginning what a time signature was, but if not, they'll see that this is a time signature. And what do these crazy numbers mean? So the top one means that there are 4 beats in the measure. So the top 4 is how many beats there are in a measure. So in a 4/4 time signature, we know that there's 4 beats. And then the bottom indicates that each beat is a quarter note because it's a 4 and a quarter is fourths. So then the students will know that 4/4 means that there's 4 beats and each beat is a quarter note. So there should be 4 quarter notes in a measure. So today we're going to learn more about reading note values so that we can understand what we sing every day. So we're going to be looking at different kinds of rhythms that make our music more interesting, because not everything is all the same all the time. So as we're learning, if you guys will just be thinking about how these rhythms will appear in our music, and be on the lookout for rhythms that you recognize, and think about our choir music and think about symbols that you've seen, and maybe you can better understand now why they are what they are and why it sounds like it sounds. So first we have quarter notes. Quarter notes equal 1 beat like we talked about because they're a quarter of the measure. So 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, and 4. And so how will that be spoken? So we'll go ta, 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 ta. Notice that a quarter note, like we said, is using 1/4 of the measure, or 1 beat. So it's like fractions in math. So since we know that a quarter note gets 1 beat, how many beats do you think that a half note would get? And so hopefully at this point a student would say 2. And then I would say why? And they would hopefully be able to identify that it would be half of the measure, and so it would be 2 beats, like 2/4. And so how do we think that would sound? And so hopefully a student could demonstrate, or as a class we could go ta, ta, instead of quarter notes being ta, 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 ta. So here's the challenge question. What about a dotted half note? So maybe a student would know that it's 3 because it's written right there. But also, if they didn't, then I would obviously reveal that and ask why, what does that dot mean? Why is that there? Why does that make it mean 3? And the extra credit kind of deal would be that the dot adds half of the value of the preceding note, so that a dotted note has 3 beats. And the goal of this having this note in would be for students that are already more advanced so that they don't quite get bored. So it's going to kind of, when they create their own rhythms, give them more options while giving the students that are kind of more average the ability to kind of just taste a little bit of something a little more complex. And then the question I will ask is, why can't we have all dotted half notes in this measure? In every other measure that we look at, you can have 2 half notes, you can have 1 whole note, you can have 4 quarter notes, but why can you only have 1 dotted? And then you have a quarter note, and that's because it's 3 beats, and there's 4 beats in the measure, and you can't divide that. So how would we count this? So we would count this by going ta, ta. So what about a whole note? Can anyone tell me how many beats a whole note would have? And so hopefully a student would respond that there would be 4 beats in a whole note because it's a whole measure. So how would we count this? Ta. And so I'm encouraging, by having students speak, I think that's more effective than clapping because you can more easily gauge if a student is getting the rhythm incorrectly, but by having them do the hand motions, they're emphasizing each beat that the note is getting so that they're not just saying ta willy-nilly. So what about 8th notes? These are a little bit trickier too. And then hopefully a student would say that they're a half of a beat. And so I anticipate that students may be a little bit confused with this if they haven't experienced rhythm before, because these are just a little bit, there's more, they're smaller. But I can hopefully explain it because it's 1/8 of a beat, or 1/8 of a measure, so yeah. Why are they called 8th notes? Because they're 1/8 of a measure. And then hopefully we can go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if the students struggle with this, we can start with quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then shift to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So let's put all of these skills that we have just learned, except for our challenge note, that's our extra credit, let's put them all together into one pattern, and let's clap them all so that we are getting it into our system a little bit and getting to understand it a little better. So we're going to start, it's going to go from biggest to smallest. So everybody ready? I'll count off by 1 measure and then we'll be ready to go. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. So then after they do that, we may have to do it again through a couple of times so that it kind of gets in their muscle memory a little bit better and so they get a kind of better understanding because it'll be their first time putting it together. But then once they do that well, then we'll shift to Jingle Bells. I'm using Jingle Bells because it's similar to the piece that they're doing in class. So, all right, class. So here's our other rhythm pattern, Jingle Bells. You'll notice that it's a little bit familiar. So can anybody identify places that the notes are different? They might have questions. Does anyone have any concerns? So that they can hopefully talk through anything that they're not sure about, and then I'll count off. All right, class, so let's count this rhythm pattern. I'll give you a measure and then we'll be ready to go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. Great job, guys. So now let's practice together as a group. So I'm going to pull up a blank sheet. I'll use the whiteboard in class, but we don't have one in this space. Let's see. If it comes up. There we go. Okay. So class, we're gonna compose a rhythm pattern together. So I'll have this written on the board when they get in the room, but since I had to use the smart board, I couldn't. But anyways, so what I will do during this time is call on each I'll have 5, there's 4 written here because there's not as much space, but I'll have 5 measures written out, just kind of like in a rhythmic line, and I'll call on one student. I'll call on a total of 5 students, but 1 per measure, and each student can give me whatever rhythm pattern they want. So say this person wants to do a half and 2 quarters, and this person wants to do like 4/8 and a half, etc. As long as it equals 4/4, they'll be able to do that, and then we'll clap it together as a class. So I won't do that all by myself because it doesn't really help, but that will be the task. And that way, hopefully, they'll understand how to create a rhythm pattern so that when they get to this next task in the PowerPoint, it'll make a lot more sense. So then hopefully that transition will be a lot smoother whenever I have kiddos and a whiteboard. And I'll go ahead and have, obviously, that written on the board before I get going so that they aren't staring at the teacher writing on the board, because that's always a slow thing for kids. It's a time for distraction, but anywho. So after they finish their rhythm pattern as a class, then I'll say, great job guys, you are ready to go. So now it's your turn to be a composer. So if you can get in a group of 3 or 4 students, use your paper with the rhythm lines that I will have handed out to compose 5 measures of rhythm and practice to perform for the class. So you can use your group members to all come up together with a rhythm pattern that's 5 measures long. I just ask that you use at least 3 of the types of notes that we talked about. So does everyone remember? Who can tell me what the types of notes are? And then have a student say that it's whole, half, quarter, and eighth. And so then from that, then I'll say great. And so if you guys will compose a 5-measure rhythm pattern for us, and then practice it with your group, because you're going to perform it for the class like we did all together, but as a group. And if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll be coming by to answer your questions. And once you finish, you'll notice that there's a second line on your paper, so you can go ahead and start working on your own 5-measure rhythm that'll be just like the one you did with your group, but by yourself, and turn it in to me at the end of class. You're allowed to use all of the notes that we talked about today, and if you know other notes, that's great. Just make sure that it adds up to, of course, the 4 notes, 4 beats in a measure. And so once you turn in those lines to me at the end of class, I'll provide feedback to you while I'm at home, and then bring it back to you, because then you're going to get to learn to perform your individual rhythm to the class for your individual grade, performance grade for the week. So get ready, get set, and be the composer. And so then I'll give them about 10 minutes, or kind of gauge how their room is going, but based on time, it'll probably be 10-ish, maybe 8-ish minutes, and give them a chance to compose their little rhythm, and then call on, since our class is pretty small, it should be about 3 or 4 groups, and so have each of them perform their rhythm, and then their ticket out of the door will be, which ticket out of the door used loosely, but their independent practice will be that independent rhythm that I'll provide feedback on, make sure they're all good to go, and have them perform in the next class, so that they're kind of building on that skill. So great job, guys. Next class, we will you will get ready to perform your individual rhythms, and we will sing our chorus piece and notice the rhythms that we now understand. So as you guys are at home, if you look over your music and practice before next class, look through, and I challenge you, I'll offer extra credit for anybody who can write out what the notes of, we'll say 10 measures of your music are. So if you look through and find notes that you recognize, write them out and get some extra credit. So for right now, we'll just listen to our piece that we looked at the beginning of class and search for rhythms that may be familiar from what we learned today. So if you can get out your choir folder and look, and if you can identify some rhythms that you know, that'll help you get toward that extra credit. And then I'll play this video. And obviously our class wouldn't have a choir folder. And I'm not going to play it, but obviously our class wouldn't have a choir folder because we're not in choir, but I think that would be like the most realistic, and I didn't want to pull up the SMART document again, but yeah.